Darkness and fear are two things that are intertwined with each other. There isn't a single one of us who doesn't feel afraid of the dark, though our reasons for being afraid may vary. Some of us are scared of the dark because we remember the ghost stories our grandmothers used to tell us when we were kids. Stories about ghosts and ghouls. Others are afraid of the dark because they think about the loneliness they feel in their lives. And then there are those who fear the darkness because it feels like they're confronting the unknown. But in the end, regardless of how different our reasons might be, darkness will always remain something terrifying for all of us. That's why on that day, I had to face my own fear. I was leaving my apartment to go to work. I stopped in front of the door of my flat and pressed the elevator button. I waited for a minute or so because I live on the 11th floor, and the old elevator takes some time to arrive. Plus, the cabin of that elevator is a bit shaky. It's an older model. Anyway, the elevator finally arrived. The doors opened, and I stepped inside. After pressing the button for the ground floor, the elevator started moving down. As it descended, I began thinking about what awaited me at work as soon as I got there. But suddenly, I felt the cabin shaking violently from side to side, and the lights began flickering. Honestly, I froze. My whole body trembled. I tried desperately to stop the cabin by pressing the emergency stop button, but nothing worked. Amidst my panic and attempts to halt the elevator, the lights went out completely. Out of sheer terror, I pulled my phone from my pocket, but my trembling hands caused it to slip and fall. I bent down to pick it up, but to my surprise, it wasn't there. Where did my phone go? I groped around blindly on the floor of the cabin, searching for it, but it was nowhere to be found. Hi everyone, a new episode based on real events. This episode seems pretty chilling, tackling perhaps the one thing most of us are afraid of, or maybe weren't before. But if something like this happened inside an elevator, we'd all be terrified. Let's dive in. I stood there steadying myself, trying to figure out what to do next. But just then I saw it, right in front of me in the mirror, a white light. The light wasn't coming from outside the mirror, it was emanating from within it. It shone brightly at first, then gradually dimmed until, in the reflection, a strange scene appeared before me. I saw myself standing at my desk in the office, talking to one of my colleagues. I said, "Rest in peace, Mia." And with that, the light returned, everything went back to normal, and the elevator continued its descent. At that moment, I glanced down between my legs and found my phone lying there, perfectly fine, untouched. As soon as the elevator reached the ground floor, I rushed out of the cabin and stood outside, stunned. What had just happened? What was that I saw in the elevator? I couldn't answer those questions. Lost in thought, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. It was one of my neighbors descending the stairs since he lived on the first floor, where there's no elevator. "Good morning," he greeted cheerfully. "Good morning, Leo," I replied. "What are you doing standing here? Everything okay?" Yeah, everything's fine. Just heading to work." "No problem. Have a great day." "You too," I said, then walked off. But throughout the journey to work, I sat silently in the bus, trying to make sense of what had happened. When I finally arrived at the office, I entered the building and glanced over at Rodwa's desk. She wasn't there yet. I sat down at my own desk and began working. About an hour passed, and when I looked up again, her desk was still empty. Confused, I got up and went over to Sam, her close friend who sat nearby. "Good morning, Sam," I said. "I was wondering, has Mia come in today? Her desk is empty." "Oh yes, it's empty. She hasn't arrived yet. Do you know why?" "No idea, but when she gets here, let's find out." I returned to my desk and resumed working until around noon. That's when our manager walked into the office and announced, "Who's coming with us to the funeral today, everyone?" As soon as I heard the word funeral, my heart sank. I stopped everything I was doing and looked up at him. "Whose funeral?" I asked hesitantly. "It's Mia's. She passed away yesterday, and the burial is today." My throat tightened. I forced myself to swallow and managed to choke out, "No, I can't attend." "I won't go." Sam spoke up, visibly upset. "Oh, such a tragedy. Excuse me, Mr. Alex, I'll come with you." I didn't know what to focus on, but I tried to continue working despite the unease gnawing at me. Still, the scene I'd witnessed in the elevator haunted my mind. I saw Mia in that vision, and now, was this really going to happen? How could it? I stepped outside the office building and lit a cigarette, trying to clear my head of these negative thoughts and distract myself with anything else. After finishing the cigarette, I went back inside and resumed working until later that evening after returning from the condolence visit. On my way home, I stopped by the pharmacy near my street and picked up some headache medicine, not because the pain was unbearable, but because it helps me sleep. When I got home, I took the elevator up to my apartment. Strangely enough, nothing unusual happened during the ride. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The day passed and I spent much of it reflecting on the incident, though I couldn't come to any conclusions. The next morning I woke up, got dressed and headed to work. Stepping into the elevator, I was admittedly nervous, glancing left and right, staring into the mirror. But nothing happened, and I made it to the office without incident. As soon as I entered, I saw Mia's imagination sitting at her desk, dressed in black. Disturbed, I cautiously approached her. She turned to me. I frozen in my place. Then eerily, she disappeared. As soon as I turned around, I didn't find anything. Her desk was empty. Henry came to and he said, "Is something wrong, Sam?" "No, nothing's wrong," I lied. "Then why do you look so pale?" "It's nothing really." Returning to my desk, I sat paralyzed by fear. What was happening to me? Online searches led only to theories far removed from reality. This wasn't fleeting. It was real. I decided to push it aside, fearing where it might lead. For 3 weeks, life seemed normal again, until one Friday. Heading to the market, I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button, and braced myself. Just like before, the elevator shook violently, the lights flickered, and the voice demanded, "Open your eyes to see what you must see." Terrified, I obeyed. Darkness surrounded me until the bright light reappeared in the mirror, revealing a new scene. Myself buying produce in the street. Suddenly, brakes screeched, followed by a thud. Turning, I saw a boy lying unconscious on the ground, struck by a bus. When the elevator resumed moving, I stumbled out, shaken. Walking through the market, I resolved not to buy from the vendor I'd seen in the vision. Yet fate intervened. He approached me insistently. Reluctantly, I followed him to his stall. Scanning the street, I noticed something odd. No cars in sight. Relieved, I turned back, but then screeching brakes shattered the calm. A crowd gathered around a boy lying motionless on the ground. They lifted him and sped toward the hospital. Walking home, suffocated by dread, I dragged my feet along the ground, burdened by the weight of what I'd witnessed. Something caught my attention just now. The scene I saw in the elevator was different from what happened to the kid earlier. It wasn't a bus that hit him, it was a car. But as I stood there pondering this, I thought to myself, what's the difference? Whether it's a bus or a car, the boy still got hit, and I couldn't do anything about it. Yes, I looked at the road. There were no cars at that moment, and besides, I didn't know a car would hit him. That's just how fate works, I guess. Anyway, since I couldn't walk far, I flagged down a taxi and asked the driver to take me home. I entered the building, stood in front of the elevator, and stared at it while asking myself, what will I see this time? Whatever it is, it can't be normal. Seeing everything before it happens isn't natural, but something felt wrong. I had to figure it out. But how? That's the problem. How do I even begin to understand? Where is Mark, the responsible of the building? I placed the bag near the entrance and knocked on his door next to the elevator. A little girl around 7 years old opened the door and said, "Dad's not here." "Where is he, sweetheart?" "He's washing his car outside." I left her and went back outside to look for him. After searching for a bit, I found him standing by his cars, cleaning it. I called out to him, and when he approached, I asked, "Tell me, Mark, is there something wrong with the elevator?" "No, nothing's broken," he replied. "But has anything strange ever happened with this elevator before?" "What do you mean, strange?" "I mean, has anyone complained about seeing weird things in the elevator?" He looked at me, puzzled, then shook his head. "No, no one's ever complained about that." I realized I wouldn't get any useful answers from him, so I said, "All right, Mark, thank you." Then I turned and walked away. He stood there staring at me in confusion. When I entered the lobby again, I grabbed my bags, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button for the 11th floor. I couldn't possibly climb all those stairs. Just as the doors were closing, I saw Mark standing by the gate, looking at me. Then the doors shut and the elevator started moving. Once I reached my apartment, I put the groceries in the kitchen, sat down at my computer, and began searching online again. I typed out everything that had been happening to me in detail, but like last time, I couldn't find anything definitive. All I found were guesses and theories. Some people said it might be precognition or foresight, the ability to predict future events. Others referred to it as moments of sudden inspiration or messages from beyond. Most discussions revolved around these kinds of ideas, though some veered off into unrelated topics. In the end, I couldn't make sense of what was going on with me. Eventually frustrated, I decided to shut down the computer and go to bed so I could wake up fresh for work the next day. About a month and a half passed without incident. I used the elevator normally coming and going until one morning as I was heading to work, I pressed the button for the ground floor. As usual, the elevator began its descent, but suddenly stopped between two floors. The lights flickered and went out completely. This time, however, I decided not to close my eyes and avoid the vision. I turned toward the mirror inside the elevator and waited to see what would appear. The light reflected brightly in the mirror, gradually fading until the scene emerged. I was walking down the street wearing the same outfit I had on right now. At the end of the street, I glanced across the road and waved at a taxi to wait for me. I crossed the street without looking, and just then I heard a loud crash. I saw myself fall to the ground, blood pooling around my head. My eyes were closed. I couldn't believe I'd seen myself die. When the elevator finally resumed and opened, I stumbled out feeling dizzy. I sat beside the elevator, staring at the gate, thinking, if I leave this building, I'll die. Every vision I've seen in the mirror always comes true. No, I can't go outside. I reopened the elevator door to try ascending again, but the moment I stepped in, I slammed the button to close it and vowed never to ride this cursed thing again. Instead, I climbed the stairs all the way to the 11th floor. It was exhausting, but better than risking another terrifying encounter in the elevator. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto the nearest couch. If you were in my shoes and saw yourself dying minutes before it happened, what would you do? I don't think you'd have an answer either. I sat there for nearly an hour trying to process everything. Finally, I mustered the strength to stand up and went to wash my face in the bathroom. As I raised my head from the sink, I noticed something written on the bathroom mirror. Destiny. It was scrawled in an unfamiliar substance, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wipe it off. Terrified, I ran out of the bathroom, locked myself in my room, and cowered alone, unsure why I was so afraid. In my fear, I decided to escape into sleep. I turned off the lights, lay down on the bed, and tried to relax. But within seconds, I pictured myself lying lifeless on the ground surrounded by people. I bolted upright, switched on the light, and heard a voice inside me. Why are you afraid of death? You live alone. There's no one who'll mourn your loss, and no one whose departure would grieve you. Maybe death is the best path for someone like you. But I don't want to die. Not now. And whose choice is it? Do you really think you have control over this? Frustrated, I got up, turned on all the lights in the apartment, opened the windows, and watched the people below. I wanted to feel connected, to remind myself I wasn't entirely alone. But deep down, I knew if I went outside, I'd meet the same fate I'd seen in the mirror. Instead, I turned on the TV, cranked up the volume, and retreated to the kitchen to distract myself. Cooking seemed like a good idea, a way to occupy my mind. I decided to make baked pasta and started chopping ingredients. Suddenly, I cut my finger. Blood dripped everywhere, and I rushed to rinse it under the faucet. But the bleeding wouldn't stop. The water flowed over my hand, mixing with the blood. Confused, I grabbed some instant coffee powder, sprinkled it on the wound, and miraculously, the bleeding ceased. Shaken, I abandoned the cooking and returned to the living room to watch TV. Food was the last thing on my mind. It was merely a distraction. I barely remember the movie playing because my thoughts kept drifting back to the vision. At one point, I swear I saw the exact scene play out on the screen. Me lying motionless on the ground. Panicked, I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. Just then, my phone rang. It was Mr. Alex, my boss. Yes, Mr. Alex. You sound terrible. Are you okay? To be honest, I'm not feeling well. I might not come to work for the next couple of days. What's wrong? I don't know, Mr. Alex, take care. Let me know if you need anything. After hanging up, I felt a sticky sensation on my hand. Looking down, I saw blood staining the chair where I'd been sitting. I rushed to the bathroom, grabbed a bandage, and patched myself up. For the rest of the day, I alternated between restless pacing and collapsing onto the couch. Unable to focus or relax, an overwhelming sense of dread consumed me. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Alex. "What's wrong, Sam? Why haven't you seen a doctor?" "I can't go outside, Mr. Alex. I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "That I'll die." Mr. Alex sighed deeply. "Listen, we're all going to die someday. What makes your situation unique? I've seen my own death twice now. How am I supposed to act like everything's fine?" Mr. Alex paused, then said gently, "Let me call someone who can help. There's a wise sheikh I know. Shall we visit him together?" "No, please don't ask me to leave the house," I pleaded. "Can he come here instead?" Mr. Alex agreed and made the call. Within half an hour, the psychiatrist arrived. From the moment he stepped in, his calm demeanor contrasted sharply with my anxiety. He greeted me warmly, asking, "How are you holding up, Sam?" "I'm barely functioning," I admitted. The psychiatrist nodded knowingly and remained silent for a while. Finally, Mr. Alex broke the silence, explaining my situation. "Dr. Sam is too afraid to step outside because he believes he'll die." The psychiatrist turned to me and asked softly, "Sam, do you think that you always get a style alive?" Confused, I replied, "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "You claim to know how you'll die, yet you seem uncertain about when. Isn't that contradictory?" I swallowed hard. "But how can I be sure? All I know is that I've seen myself dying in these visions, and every time, the events unfold exactly as I foresee them." The psychiatrist leaned forward. "So you trust these visions implicitly?" "Yes. 2 previous incidents came true. The colleague who's passed away and the boy hit by the car. Both match my premonitions perfectly." The psychiatrist chuckled softly, which infuriated me. "Why are you laughing?" I demanded. His expression softened. "Because, Sam, you're resisting destiny. What if these visions aren't meant to scare you but to prepare you?" And so the conversation continued, leaving me more confused than ever. Was I truly destined to die soon, or was there a deeper lesson in all of this? Only time would tell. "Calm down, Sam. I want to tell you that your thinking is flawed." "Flawed? How? You didn't know that your colleague had passed away before you went to work, right?" "No, I didn't. I only found out when Mr. Alex mentioned it." At that moment, Mr. Alex spoke up and asked me, "What do you mean, Sam? Didn't you comment on her post that same night?" I looked at him confused. "Comment? On what?" "I don't remember commenting on anything." He pulled out his phone, opened the post by Mia, and showed it to me. I stared at the screen, and sure enough, there was a comment written from my account. It said, "Rest in peace." "But how? When did I write this?" I stammered. The timestamp on the post confirmed it was from the previous night, right after she shared it online. I leaned back in my chair, unable to process what I was seeing. But then suddenly I sat upright, turned to the psychiatrist and said, "All right, so I commented on the post. Can you explain how I knew Mia would wear that specific outfit the day I consoled her at the office?" The psychiatrist replied calmly, "You didn't know. You simply assumed. Think about it. Someone who's passed away will likely wear black, and it's possible that this was the only black outfit you'd ever seen her in, which coincidentally happened to be the one she wore again that day." I thought about it for a moment and realized he was right. Mia rarely wore black, except once during her grandmother's funeral, and yes, it seemed like the same outfit. But still, "She hates wearing black," I muttered. "What does that mean?" "It could make sense," I conceded reluctantly. "But what about the boy in the market? That couldn't just be an assumption." The psychiatrist raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? You mentioned that the vendor told you accidents like that happen frequently in the market, and you also said you visit that place regularly to buy things. So isn't it possible you've witnessed similar incidents before and subconsciously expected them to repeat?" I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I've seen accidents like that in the market before." Exactly, the psychiatrist continued. And here's something important. The scene you saw in the mirror involved a bus hitting the boy, but in reality it was a car that hit him. Isn't that proof enough that these are merely expectations shaped by your mind? Or rather, not even your own mind? Not my mind? Then whose? The psychiatrist paused meaningfully before saying, "Let me ask you something else. What books have you been reading lately?" "I haven't read anything," I replied quickly. "Really? Let me see your room," he requested politely. After a brief hesitation, I agreed. "Sure, but you won't find anything unusual." He nodded, stood up, and I followed him into my bedroom. As soon as we entered, he began scanning the area left and right while I watched him curiously. Finally, he approached the desk near the door and asked, "Can I open this drawer?" "Go ahead," I said with a shrug. He opened the drawer, reached inside, and pulled out 2 books. Holding them up, he asked, "What are these?" I stared at him, baffled. I don't know what those are. They're not mine." He placed the books on the desk and declared firmly, "These are books of spirit summoning. What were you doing with them?" "I swear I don't remember buying or owning these books," I exclaimed, panic rising within me. "I don't even know how they got here." The psychiatrist reassured me gently. "Don't worry, nothing bad will happen now. Come closer." With Mr. Alex nodding encouragement, I reluctantly stepped toward the psychiatrist. "Lie down on the bed and stretch out your leg," he instructed. I obeyed without question. Once I was lying down, he told me, "Close your eyes and don't open them until I say so." "Okay," I whispered nervously, closing my eyes. He told me to relax, the nightmares start growing fainter by the second. Suddenly, I felt myself standing in complete darkness, overwhelmed by intense heat. In the distance, a dim light appeared, and I instinctively moved toward it. Before I could reach the light, I heard a deep, menacing voice call out, "Stop! Come here!" I froze in terror. The light grew brighter, and in its reflection, I saw a towering black figure. I took 2 steps back, trembling with fear, but the voice spoke again. "Come closer. Don't be afraid. Why are you running from me when I haven't harmed you yet?" "Who are you?" I demanded shakily. "You've forgotten what you sought and the deal you made," the voice sneered. "I haven't made any deals. I don't know who you are," I shouted desperately. "You betrayed your promise," the voice accused, "and betrayal comes at the cost of death." "I don't know you. I swear I don't," I cried. As the psychiatrist's voice grew clearer in my ears, the dark entity began shrinking gradually. I watched as it burned and screamed in agony until it disappeared entirely. When the relax ended, the psychiatrist told me to open my eyes. Blinking against the light, I sat up and looked at him. "Do you remember what happened?" he asked softly. For a moment I struggled to recall, but then the memories flooded back. Yes, I remember everything. That day I was sitting alone, feeling bored and lonely since my parents passed away. My life felt empty, so I decided to distract myself by browsing online. I stumbled across a link discussing mysterious topics that intrigued me. When I clicked on it, I discovered it was an introduction to a book, and if I wanted to read more, I had to purchase it. The book came in 2 parts, and honestly, I was really drawn to it. I ordered them online, and they arrived 2 days later. But the strange thing was, the books I received weren't the ones I ordered. When I tried to revisit the website to complain, the link wouldn't open. I felt scammed, but there was nothing I could do. I left the books on the table for a few days, but one night, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to open them. By the end of the first page of the first book, I realized I had entered a world I wouldn't escape from unless I died. The voice, it was always in my head, though I never understood who it belonged to. He claimed he would grant me visions of the future, but he lied. He couldn't see the future or divine the unseen. When I confronted him about it, he promised to prove himself. That's when I started seeing the scenes in the elevator. Strangely, I forgot everything that had happened before. The books I initially ordered, the articles I read, and even our conversations. I don't know how I lost all those memories. The psychiatrist listened intently and then explained, "The link you followed is part of a new method used by some suspicious persons. They lure curious people like you with ordinary content, tricking them into purchasing cursed books filled with real incantations. The reason you forgot everything afterward is because the servant of the book controlled your mind, suppressing objections to its claims so it could convince you it was showing you the future. His words struck a chord deep within me. I said, "Thank you, Mr. Alex, and you, Doctor, for help." Satisfied, the shaken Mr. Alex left, and from that day forward, my life changed completely, for the better. And so ends this story, this profound message. I'm deeply grateful. Thank you all for reading this far. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications for updates.